We are at the beginning of Yud Ches, the top of 18a, and the Mishnah had said that the Kohen Gadol is allowed to take any of the karbanos for himself to do, as well as he can take a portion of the food, the parts that the Kohanim eat. He could take any portion for himself as well, or the first portion for himself. And the Gemara had said that from the lechem hapanim, from the showbread, the Kohen Gadol would review that the Kohen Gadol would take 4 or 5 of the 12 showbread of the lechem hapanim, and Rebbe says that he always takes 5. Now the Torah says in this week's parsha about the lechem hapanim, about the showbread, v'oisal Aaron levanav, it shall be for Aaron and his children, meaning that this is actually something to split between the Kohen Gadol and the Kohen. And so the Mishnah in Sukkah says that, in one opinion, every week on Shabbos, right, we have the split between the new mishmar coming in and the old mishmar going out. The new group on duty is going to come in, and the old guard going out. And so they would take the lechem hapanim, they would split the showbread, the lechem hapanim, 6 for each group. However, the Rabbi Yehuda says no. The group leaving would only get 5, because the group coming in, because they are taking over the guard and closing the doors that the others had opened, they get 7, and so the group leaving gets 5. Now, the Mishnah over there also mentions that that always for Yantiv, every one of the all of the mishmaros would come in for a Yantiv. So if a Yantiv was connected to Shabbos, and therefore, or meaning Shabbos Chalamoid, or Yantiv immediately before or immediately after Shabbos, so everybody would get all of the mishmaros together would split the lechem hapanim. However, if Shabbos was 2 days after Yantiv, not immediately after Yantiv, but the day after that, so Yantiv ended on Thursday, or Yantiv started on Monday. So really, Friday or Sunday, there was time for the other mishmaros to arrive and be there for Yantiv. As we said on Yantiv, all the mishmaros, all the watches, all the groups of kahanim that work in the different periods would be there for Yantiv. But they have enough time to go home for Shabbos, or to come after Shabbos, because you have Sunday or Friday that's not Shabbos Yantiv. However, a lot of Kohanim couldn't do that. So there's 2 opinions on whether or not those groups that would stay in the Beis Hamikdash till after Shabbos, or already be there before Yantiv, before Shabbos, and they were coming because they needed to be there for Yantiv, whether they get some of the lechem hapanim. In the one opinion, they get 2. And then the other 10 are divided between the mishmaros coming in and out, or they don't get anything because they didn't really have to be there, and so they don't get any lechem hapanim. So to recap now, 12 lechem hapanim. The simple split would be the group coming in gets 6 and the group leaving gets 6. However, Rabbi Yehuda says the group coming in gets 7 and the group leaving gets 5. And if it's 2 days, it's the second day after Yantiv or the second day before Yantiv, where some groups may be there in preparation for Yantiv, even though they're not on watch right now, they're not on duty to do the avodah. Nevertheless, they're there, so they would get 2, and then there's only 10 to split, and that's going to help. These numbers are going to help us understand where the Gemara. The different opinions of whether the Kohen Gadol gets 4, 5, or always 5. So my arba chamish. What does it mean 4 or 5? So the Gemara says l'Rabbanan. According to Rabbanan, the Amri nichnas noitel sheish v'yotze noitel sheish, that each one, the group coming in and the group going out, both get 6. Uschar hagafas dalsis loy shakil, and they're not taking any extra. The group coming in are not taking any extra on account of their merit of closing the doors that night. In other words, they're taking over. So Mishneh Eser Bayim Aflik. So the Kohen should really split with the Bnei Aaron, the Aaron, meaning the Kohen Gadol, would split with the rest of the Kohanim 6, and Batzer Chadam Palga, but you want to take less than half, as we saw the opinion of the Gemara, that really, according to the Chachamim, they would take, the Kohen Gadol would not take a full half; it would take less than half. So Batzer you should take one less than half. So Chamei Shekel. So that's why we take 5, because 6 is half, and it takes half, or less than that. Rabbi Yehuda. However, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that 2 are out of the mix. They go to the group coming in as a merit for closing door that day. So there's only 10 to split, 5 to this group and 5 to that group. That means they're taking 2 as a reward for closing the doors that night. So therefore, the group leaving only gets 5. So so the Kohen Gadol really is only splitting 10 showbreads, 10 lechem upon him with the rest of the Kohanim. But so half is 5. But so chadam palga, and he'll take 1 less than half. V'shakal arba, so he's going to take 4. So that's what the 4 and 5 is. 4, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that 2 are out of the mix because they go to as a reward to the Kohanim that are coming in and closing the door that night. So there's only 10. The Kohen Gadol takes half, or actually 1 less than half, and so half being 5, he takes 4. Or if, according to Chachamim, that both groups take 6 typically, and the Kohen Gadol wants to take half, he will get half of 12, which is 6, but he takes 1 less, is 5. So that's why, according to them, it says that Kohen Gadol would take 4 or 5 of the showbread of lechem upon. However, Rava Amar Kula Rava says no, it's all the opinion of Rebbe that he takes the complete half, not most of half. However, they follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, that Rebbe follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that the Kohanim, the group coming in, get 2 for themselves, on account of them closing doors that night. So therefore, there's only 10 in the mix to split, and he takes the full half, which is 5. So in what scenario would there be only 4 for the Kohen Gadol? He should take 5 because there's 10 in the mix for the 2 groups. The Kohen Gadol is going to take half, and the rest of the Kohanim take half. It must be talked about where a case that there's a mishmar misakev, a group that remained after Yantiv or came early before Yantiv, as we explained, where every group has to come, every group of Kohanim has to come for Yantiv. But if there's no Shabbos on Yantiv, the Shabbos before Yantiv, they don't have to be there yet. But it may be hard to travel on Friday or on Sunday, and so they remain in the Beis HaMikdash beyond the time that they're needed there, or prior to the time that they're needed there. And so, according to this opinion, they would get 2 of the 12 showbreads, 2 of the 12 lechem upon him, set aside for them, for this group, as a reward or as care for being there. So there's only 10 in the mix, 2 of which go to the incoming group for the merit of closing the door that night. So you only have 8 in the mix. 2 went to the Mishma Mesakev, 2 went to the group coming in, the Mishma coming in for closing the door for Schar Agafas Dalses. So there's only 8. The Kohen Gadol taking half of 8 is 4. The Lekem Mishma Mesakev. And when does he get 5? When it's not around Yantiv and there's a group waiting around because of on account of Yantiv. Gemara says, wait, Ikem Mishma Mesakev, Mishmoine Boila Miflik. V'shakal Arba. Ilekem Mishma Mesakev, Boila Miflik, V'shakal Chamish. So what we have is, if there's a group around, there's only 8 to split. As we mentioned, 2 already went to the Kohen, to the Kohanim that are there on account of Yantiv, and 2 for the incoming Mishmar for closing the door. So there's only a half of that. Half of the 8 is 4. And if there's no Mishmar Misakif, half of 10 is 5. So Gemara says, "My Rebbe Omer la'olam chamish." Wait, but in the statement we have Rebbe saying that you always take 5, and according to this, there is no always taking 5. there's the Mishma the Mishma Masakev during Yantif time. If there's a group remaining there or coming early, then there's only 4. Kasha, indeed, according to Rava, we would not have an explanation of that statement, that part of the of Rebbe's statement. Either way, we have the lechem apanim that the Kohen Gadol would get either 4 or 5 parts, and the reasons are either according to the Rabbanan, because the Kohen Gadol would never take half, not never, the Kohen Gadol would generally take one less than half, so he doesn't take a complete half. And the only time he takes a complete half is by the 2 breads of Shavuos, as we saw yesterday, because not to split one of the breads to take less, and there's only 2, so he's going to take half. And Rebbe says that he always takes 5, and we explain the various reasons of why the Kohen Gadol why not all 12 breads would be available to split. So the Kohen Gadol is separated for 7 days. He's in the chamber, in Lishkas Parhedrin. For 7 days they spritz on him to make him pure. We saw in the previous avodah that the Kohen Gadol would be given certain parts of the avodah so that he can practice it and get familiar with it. And this Mishnah is going to tell us that he had handlers, if you would, people who would be there with him to take care of him throughout these days to make sure that he's ready for Yom Kippur. So Masr leZakanim, they gave him elders, Miziknei Beistin, from the elders of Beistin, V'karen lefanav b'seder hayom, and they would read before him the Seder Hayom, the order of the day, meaning the Torah portion of Acharei, which deals with the order of the Avodah Yom Kippur, and specifically what he needed to do, and so he should become familiar with it. And they would say to him, Ishi Kohen Gadol, our master Kohen Gadol. You read this with your yourself, with your mouth, meaning become familiar with it. Shema shachachta, perhaps you've forgotten this teaching. Shema le'lamato, perhaps you never even learned it. Erev Yom Kippurim Shachris, and on the morning of Erev Yom Kippur, meaning the morning of that night would be you begin Yom Kippur, that evening would begin Yom Kippur. Mamidin oiseh shar mizrach. So they bring him to the eastern gate, the entrance of the Azara. Uma'avirin lefanav, and they bring before him parim, bulls, ve'elim, and rams, ukavasim, and lamb, the things that he's going to need for karbanos for the next day. So he should become familiar with them. Kadeshei makir, so he should become familiar, veragil, and accustomed ba'avodah, with the service, so he should know exactly what each one is and what to do and how to do it. So they would bring it before him and sort of give a demonstration, a live run through, so that he would have the awareness and the ability to do it properly. Now the Gemara says that Kol Shivas, the Mishnah says that Kol Shivas Yomim lo yamanim mimenu machal Mishnah. All 7 days, or actually the 6 of the 7 days, they would not stop him from eating anything he wants. So you want obviously kosher, meaning, but there was no specific diet. However, Machal Mishnah, Erev Yom Kippurim. However, on Erev Yom Kippur, Chashecha, Im Chashecha, what is close to the evening, they would not allow him to eat a lot. Why? Because food will bring him to be tired and fall asleep. And as we'll see, the concern of falling asleep is that he may have a semen emission and become tummy and not be become a keri tuma and not be able to do the avodah that day. So the Gemara says, okay, so they would have, the Mishnah said that they would have chachamim that would read to him, and then they would say to him, our master Kohen Gadol, read by yourself. Maybe you forgot it, maybe you never learned it. So bishlam shachach lachayat. Okay, we forget it. It's possible for someone to forget something he's learned. Elashema lamad. But really, is it possible that Kohen Gadol never learned the Chumash, the parsha of Yom Kippur, of the Avodah? Mima kaminan ki haygavna, would we establish it? Would we appoint a kohen gadol of such lack of knowledge? But we learned. V'hakoyen hagadol me'echad. The Torah says again in this week's parsha, on the kohen who is greater than his brethren. Sheyehi gadol me'echad. He should be bigger or greater than his brethren. B'koyach, in strength, b'noi, in beauty, b'chachma, in wisdom, uv'osher, in wealth. Acher mayrim, and others say, usually reference to Rabbi Meir, minayin shim einlay. And what happens if the kohen gadol does not have wealth? That his brethren, the kohen gadol, the kahanim, will contribute to him to make him wealthy. The kohen who is great from his brothers, meaning gadleyu mishalechav, make him greater on account of his brothers, so they would even contribute to make him wealthy. So we see that he has to be greater in chachma and wisdom, as well as other things. And how can you say he doesn't even know the parsha, the Torah that deals with the Yom Kippur Avodah? He never learned that, and he's gadol b'chachma, greater in wisdom. Amar Rav Yosef Lekashi. That's not a question. Kan b'mikdash rishon. You're talking about the first base of mikdash, where there was an appropriate system for appointing kohen gadol, kohanim gedolim. Kan b'mikdash sheni. And here we're talking about the second base of mikdash, where unfortunately the Greeks and the Romans had control over Eretz Yisrael, and the powers over Bnei Yisrael had bribed their way into Greek culture and Roman culture and Roman stature, and as a result, the Kohanim Gedolim were people who bribed their way into it. Amar Ravasi, as Ravasi said in one scenario, one of the last of the Kohanim Gedolim, Tarka v'dinra, a half a saw full of gold, an enormous basket full of gold dinner. Ayla la Marta bas Baisus. Martha, the daughter of Baisus, which we've seen of her before. She was enormously wealthy, and when she became widowed, she married a Kohen, Yehoshua ben Gamla, and she gave this enormous amount of money, Liana Malka, to Yanai, the king who was in control, in order that ad the Eikmel Yeshua ben Gamla began until her husband Yeshua ben Gamla was appointed Kohen Gadol. Now, as a result, Yeshua ben Gamla, the Gemara tells us, actually did great things, even though that he was a Kohen Gadol appointed on account of his wife's wealth. He did great things and established learning centers for the poor and then for everyone, and brought about, as the Gemara says, if not for him, Torah would have been lost to Am Yisrael. He established free tuition-free schools for all children, poor and wealthy alike, in order to make sure that the poor children also had an ability to learn. So in the end, he did great things, but he wasn't Kohen Gadol on account of his great stature, his great wisdom in Torah. It was on account of somebody bribed an official, and he got it. And that was the typical during that era, and therefore they would have to say to him, maybe you've never learned this, so let's try and go through this again. Erev Yom Kippurim Shachris. And on the morning of Yom Kippur, they would take him through and show him bulls, rams, and lambs. The Gemara is going to say, wait, you're missing one. What about goats? There were two goats that he would have as well. One was Lashem, one was La'azazel, went out to the desert to be thrown off a cliff. So, Tana Afas Seirim. So in one brayso it says, also the goats would be brought before him. But Tana did done, but our Mishnah didn't mention it. My time Tana. Why didn't they mention it? Seirim, goats. Kivan da'achet, so because it's coming to atone for the sins of Bnei Yisrael. Chol shadaite, and that would make him feel weak. Like, oh my goodness, how am I going to do the service and bring atonement for all of Kollel Yisrael and for all the sins of Bnei Yisrael? That's a very tall order. and make him feel insecure and weak in mind, and so they didn't bring that before. So I wanted to wait. Well, what about the bull? The bull is coming for his own sins, or for the sins of the kahanim, his brethren. Al chetu de'asi. Par, so Gemara says no. Kivan the alav alecha b'kahanim, since it's coming to atone for himself and for his brethren, the kahanim, de'asi becha b'kahanim. Is be milsa made the other about his brothers, the kahanim. He knows which kahanim. He's the Kohen Gadol. He knows which kahanim have made mistakes and need to do tshuva, and he'll talk to them. And he will bring them back in tshuva. So his own sins he can do tshuva for. His brethren, the kahanim, he can work with them. But bekuli Yisrael lo yada. But for the entirety of Am Yisrael, how's he supposed to know? And how's he supposed to help them do tshuva? And so he feels weak about that. Amarvina Haina Damri Inchi. So Ravina said, this is what people say. Ibar achtach daila. If your nephew is a tax collector, if you see him in the marketplace, don't cross in front of him, because he's looking for someone to tax, for someone to take something from, and he knows that what your wealth is and how much you have, because he's your nephew. So he's going to pick on you and say, hey, you haven't paid up your taxes. So to the Kohen Gadol, his brethren, he knows his brethren. Right? He's the relative that knows what to pick at. However, for the rest of Am Yisrael, he doesn't know what to do. There's too much, and that would be too much of a burden, a weakening the resolve of the Kohen Gadol to bring atonement through the avoda for all the Klal Yisrael. So Kol Shivas Hayamim Lo Yamaynim, all 7 days there was no, besides for this last day, there was no specific diet. But on the last day, the Mishnah says, close to the evening, they wouldn't let him eat too much so he doesn't fall asleep, he doesn't become tired. Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda ben Akusa Eimer, Rabbi Yehuda ben Akusa actually says that besides for that he wouldn't eat a lot, the entire day they gave him particular foods so that it would act as a laxative, and it would empty him, so all of Yom Kippur he wouldn't need the restroom. Machilinus is siltus of beitzim, fine flour and eggs, kadela masmasai, to act as a laxative, and in this way he would clean and empty himself and cleanse himself on the day before Yom Kippur, and so by the time it came to Yom Kippur, he was he wouldn't need the restroom. Amrulai kasha kesha maybe I'll say the chimum. Wait, that is going to add to his body temperature or his difficulties, and he's going to for sure have a semen emission. That's going to make it worse, not better. So that's not a good idea. Tanya Sumcha Samar. Sumcha says, Mishum Rabbi Meir, in the name of Rabbi Meir, Ein machila noisei loy avia. They wouldn't give him to eat any avia. Avi. What is avi? The Gemara is going to tell us. V'amri loy abavi. And some say no, it was abavi. So these are abbreviations. And Aleph, Beis, and Yud represent certain foods, or abavi, Aleph, Beis, Yud represent foods. And some say also not white wine. So what loy avi? What does it mean, not avi, Aleph, Beis, Yud? Lo esrog. They wouldn't give him any esrog to eat. V'lo beitzim, no eggs. V'lo yayin yashan, not old wine. V'amri lo abavi, and some say, no, there's an additional base there. Lo esrog, not an esrog. V'lo beitzim, not eggs. And the additional base is v'lo basar shabin, not fatty meat. V'lo yayin yashan, not white, old wine. V'yeshem aflo yayin lavan, and some say also not white wine. What's the reason not to give him any of these foods? Maybe it's ultimately tuma, because it brings a person to tuma. He may end up having a semen emission, and that would bring him the tuma of keri, and he won't be able to do the avodah. So to avoid this, we don't let him fall asleep. We don't have him eat too heavy so that he doesn't fall asleep, and we don't serve him specific foods which are more likely to cause a semen emission. So Tana Rabbanan, So in an abnormal semen emission called is something like gonorrhea, so that's called a zav. So Tanarban a zav, it will not be considered causing tuma if we know that it comes from food, from overeating. And any foods would be included in that. Rabbi Lazar, the son of Pinchas, said in the name of Yehuda ben Beseira that actually we wouldn't give him to eat other foods as well. So what do these means? And not anything that is likely to cause tumah. So what are these foods that we wouldn't give him? So loy chagavi, loy chalav, not milk, v'loy gavina, nor cheese, v'loy beitza, nor egg, v'loy yayin, nor wine, v'loy gevim, made garisin, some sort of porridge, shell pul, made of beans, ubasar, shavin, and fatty meat, umarius, and some fish brine. V'loy kol dvarim amevim l'deitum, or anything else that is likely to cause semen emission, bring him to tumah. And what is that anything? This is to bring the teaching of Brisa. The Brisa says, there are 5 things that are likely to cause a semen emission and bring a person to tumah. And these are them: hashum, garlic, mashachalayim, and cress, vechalaglugas. Don't know what that is. Rashi says it's the old French word pulver. I have no idea what it is. Maybe one of your translations says what it is. We're now in 18b at the top, second word in. Beitzim and eggs, vagargir, and again Rashi says arug. I don't know what that is. In the pasuk it says in Malachim, one went out to gather lights in the field, meaning to get to plants called lights. What are these plants called lights? Tanamish Meir Rabbi Meir is a gargir. That's this plant gargir. Why is the oil of the gargir called the oil of light? It makes the eyes beautiful. Or not beautiful, illuminated. It makes the eyesight clear and illuminated. Amar Avuna, a mitzvah gargir. If somebody is shopping and finds this gargir, if he's able to get it to eat, he should eat it. If not, at least rub it onto the eyes. Amar Papa begargir matzrana, and it's got to be the gargir that grows at the end of the field, so there aren't other fruits and vegetables around it, which would weaken its strength. Amar Rav Gidl Amar Rav. Rav Gidl said in the name of Rav, now that we've mentioned certain foods that it can cause a semen emission and tumah, and when it says that if you're a guest in someone's house, don't eat eggs, because we just said that that could cause someone while sleeping to have a semen emission and cause tumah, and that would be inappropriate as a guest in their on the guest's bed. And also, don't use the homeowner's linens. Use your own, so that they wouldn't have to wash your linen after a semen emission, after that night. So the Gemara now, in telling us how to avoid a semen emission, the Gemara now tells us that Rav and Rav Nachman would have a practice that when they traveled to another town, they would have and their wives were home, so they would maybe be alone and therefore have a semen emission. So they would have set up with someone and to find them a bride for a day. So Rav Kimikla Levdarshish Machras Man Avaliyema. It would send a notice and say who wants to be a bride for a day. Rav Nachman Kad Mikli L'Shachansiv. Rav Nachman, similarly, when he would come to Shachansiv, would say the same Machras Man Avaliyema. And one says, what are you talking about? How can they do that? But Tanya Rabbi Eliezer Yaakov Omer, Rabbi Eliezer Yaakov says, a man shall not marry two wives in different countries or different cities, because if you do that, Shema perhaps is may have a child from one and a child from the other. They don't know of each other, and they're going to be siblings that'll end up marrying each other. So obviously, this is a terrible idea, and you're not allowed to do that. So why would Rav or Rav Nachman do this? As a result of that carelessness, what would end up happening is Mamale Kala Olam Kulai Mamzeras would fill the world with mamzeras, with mamzer, because you have siblings marrying each other. While Zed Nemar, and for such a act of having a wife in different cities, which wouldn't know of each other, Mala Aret Zima, you're filling the land with inappropriate behavior. Amri Rabbana, so the first thing I want to say is, well, everybody would know. Yeah, that's Rav's bride out in Darshish. Rabbanan, Rabbanan, everybody knows about this occurrence, and it wouldn't be a secret. So Gemara says, so what? But there's another issue. There's an issue that he come to town and find the bride for the day. In any case, would be prohibited to him because she'd become a nida. But Amar Rava, as Rava said, to saying when someone proposes marriage to a woman, that if she accepts it, the assumption is that that moment would have, out of the excitement, become a tamei nida, and they'd have to wait 7 days. The Gemara says, Rabbanan, perhaps the Rabbanan they would send someone in advance, days in advance. Have a maktami. So they would send a message. Say more, perhaps, and this is the halacha. No, they never really married this woman. They would just ask if somebody would be willing, so they would be appointed. Why? Because this is a classic euphemism, the teaching of someone who's hungry. Someone's only hungry if they don't have bread in their basket. If they have bread in their basket, they can go on for a while and not feel hungry, because if they want, they could eat, so they're fine. They could go a whole day without eating if they have bread in their basket. If they don't have bread in the basket, that's when they're hungry. So what Rav and Rav Nachman were doing was they just pointed someone if they wanted to marry, somebody that would be willing to do this, but never actually betrothed them or married them. And this way, they never transgressed the idea of having a wife in two different places. It was just the idea that they would, if they wanted to, they could, and this way that would keep them back from a semen emission. Tosfos over here at length discusses that doesn't really help, because if they're not allowed to marry them, so then it's not like having bread in your basket, right? What kind of idea was this? How did it work? Why would it work? And the problems of halachic problems of that as well. Okay. In any case, the purpose of this discussion here is that certain foods the Kohen Gadol would be avoided for the Kohen Gadol on the day before Yom Kippur, so as to make sure that he does not become tamei, does not have a semen emission become invalidated, and therefore would lose the opportunity to do the avodah on Yom Kippur. Instead, they fed him foods that would not make him fall asleep and not have greater chances of semen emission. Masru Ziknei Beis Din, the next Mishnah tells us that after that the elders of the Beis Din had read for him the readings of the day, meaning the parsha of Acharei, Masru Ziknei Beis Din Ziknei Kahuna, and now hand him off to the elders of the Kahuna to teach him the particular parts that he needed to do in the avodah that pertain to the spices, which he had to be able to take a shovelful and all by himself pour that shovelful into his palms, into his hand, and be able to put it down on the fire in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So there, the Torah says, that he has to have full fistfuls of keturas. Now he has to put them into 2 fistfuls, but he's also carrying the spices in a pan. So how does he do that? So he had to learn how to be able to do that. So they would give him over to the elders of the Kohanim, and the elders of the Kohanim would make him take an oath, because the tzedukis, the elders are based in the elders of Kohanim, because the tzedukim, the Sadducees, they would not put the spice on the fire in the Kodesh HaKodashim, in the Holy of Holies, but rather would do that outside in the Beis HaMikdash itself and bring it in smoking into the Kodesh. Whereas the halacha is that it has to be done in the Kodesh HaKodashim, Lefnei Hashem. And so they would make him take an oath that he would do it the proper way and not like the Tzedukim. V'hishbi'u, and they made him take an oath. V'niftaru, and they would go. They would depart from him, and they would go away. V'amru, and this is what they would say to him when they made him take that oath. Ishi Kohen Gadol, our master, the Kohen Gadol, anu shaluchei Beis Din. We are the elders, we are the messengers of Beis Din. V'ata shlucheinu. But your job is to be the messenger of Bnei Yisrael, to be our proxy, our shaliach in doing the Avodah Yom Kippur, which is incumbent upon you as a messenger of Bnei Yisrael, a shliach Beis Din, and you are a messenger of the Beis Din. Mashbiin anu alecha. We place an oath upon you, by the one who rests his name in this house. By Hashem, who rests his name in this house, we place an oath upon you. Do not change anything from the way we have taught it to you. This is the halacha. This is the Masorah from Moshe Rabbeinu, exactly how to do it. Don't change it. Now, who perish? He would leave and cry. Ve'hem parshin u'bochin. And the Beis Din, the Shluchei Beis Din, the Ziknei Beis Din, the Kahanim, they would also separate from him, and they would cry. And the Gemara would explain that the reason that each one of them would cry, the Gemara will talk about that, but essentially they had to accuse him, right? To tell him not to do that, they had to take an oath. He was accused, and each one would separate and cry. We'll see about that in the Gemara. Now, Imhoya Chacham Darish. So now he's the preparation for the 7-day preparation was done. We've come up to Yom Kippur, and they told him exactly what he needs to do. They based it separated, and now he has to remain awake for the next 24 hours so that he doesn't fall asleep that night and maybe have a semen emission, and the next day for doing the avodah. So he would separate. So Imhoya Chacham, if he was a learned person, Darish. So all night he'd be awake and he would teach. He would say a drash. He would be teaching to the Kahanim that are there with him to keep him company and keep him awake. He would teach them in halacha all night in order for him not to sleep. V'im lav tamid chacham. V'im lav, and if he himself is not a scholar, so tamid chachamim darshan lefanam. So they would have other scholars that would talk to him in learning, and if he at least knows a dvar halacha, he understands halacha, even though he can't be the one teaching the halacha, but he can understand, and then they would have someone speak to him in halacha. Now, if he himself could not understand that either, in other words, that would not keep him awake. He doesn't get the wisdom that would the halacha that would be taught to him. Ragil likros, but at least he knows how to read. He was literate and was able to read, and it was common for him to read in Tanakh. So he would read. Lav, if he didn't even know how to read himself, so then others would read for him and keep him awake with that. And what would they read before him if he needed to be kept awake with reading? The Eov, they would read for him from the Sefer Eov, Job, which it's somewhat story-like, and it would keep him awake. Also Ezra, because these were things that would draw him in. and in Chronicles, Divrei Hayamim, which also has stories in it. Zachariah ben Kavutal says, many times I was there, and we would read in front of him in Daniel, also which had stories, and that was read for him in the Aramaic of Daniel. Okay, so what we saw is that the Kohen Gadol, many different things were done to keep him from having a siman mission and becoming tamei, and that that night they would keep him awake by teaching him Torah, some sort of learning in order to that there be no siman mission. No, he wasn't kept awake for a week. John, no. He'd sleep all of the 7 days. He could sleep regular. It's just the night of Yom Kippur. The night of Yom Kippur from before sunset. He could even take a nap in the afternoon. It's before sunset where he would have gone to the mikveh and make sure he has no impurity. From when sunset comes, he would then be kept awake the entire 24 hours of Yom Kippur. So not a 7-day awake, you couldn't do that, but just the night of Yom Kippur, he was kept awake so as not to fall asleep and have a siman mission. Okay, Yashikach. Tomorrow, Daf 19, we'll see the particulars of his avodah on